Welcome to Backyard Farmer, coming to you from the Nebraska State Fair. I'm Kim Todd, and we always love coming out to the fair. It's so much fun. We get to eat a corn dog, which I also always have to announce. We do want to tell you this is a taped show, so you cannot call in with your questions. That doesn't mean you can't send us your questions through email. That is byf@unl.edu. Please tell us where you're from. Give us all that good information. You can also follow us on Facebook, and you can watch everything on YouTube. So everything else is normal, except we are at the fair. All right, so Jody, you get the first round of questions. Your first one comes to us from Gretna. You have 3 pictures on this one. She has a frontier elm. It's 3 years old. She had some storm damage, and now she's seeing what she thinks is pretty major insect damage. She's wondering what she should do.
Okay, so in Gretna, we did get a lot of storm damage, and I do know that the frontier elm is supposed to be pretty resistant to some pests. However, a lot of the beetles that feed on the elm leaves can be pretty damaging to the leaves, but they're usually minor pests. So we're talking about the elm leaf beetle and the elm flea weevil. So probably some good health care for the tree, maybe pruning so that they won't fall over in those storms that we've been having. But it should be okay.
Right, and Jody, we did talk off air a little bit about that pruning. So any of those newer hybrids of the elms, they absolutely need to be pruned when they're young so that you can train them and they don't go all wonky on you. So good advice. All right, you have one picture on the next one. This is a Council Bluffs viewer, and he says, can he go ahead and cut back his milkweed because it's all covered with all sorts of things that are not very beautiful if the monarchs have finished laying their eggs?
So the monarchs haven't finished laying their eggs. There are some caterpillars out there for some of us who have been lucky, but I do understand that it can get a little squirrely in there. So if you have a lot of city mold and they're falling over, you can check to see if you've got any caterpillars and cut some of it back. But you don't usually want to cut back until temperatures are regularly below 60 degrees Fahrenheit.
And you cut yours back, and what happened?
Well, I cut mine back in the summer because of storm damage, and the new growth actually stimulated some of the female monarchs to start laying eggs. So I have a itty-bitty caterpillar, which is the first one I've had all season, so I'm pretty happy about that.
Very excited. All right, one more picture. This comes to us from Hastings, and she is wondering what this creature is that is eating her geraniums, or is it eating her geraniums?
This is a green June beetle. They're very big, and they usually feed on fruit that is rotting, so maybe it is nibbling a little bit on those petals, but it shouldn't be the one that's doing the damage. You can easily pick those off.
And is their life cycle about finished?
Pretty much. They're one of our white grub species, so yeah.
Right.
Their
time is over.
Yeah.
All right. Terry, you are next. You have 2 pictures on this one. We're not sure where this one is from, but she bought this beautiful petunia, and apparently it had a hitchhiker. She wonders what that is in the pot. I think we have a second picture that's the close-up. And what should she do about that?
Well, that's purslane, so it could be a friend or a foe, depending on who you are or what you're doing. It is edible, but you can't just pull it out if you don't want it there. So up to you.
And don't let it go to seed.
Yeah, don't let it go to seed, and don't throw it on your turf because it can germinate at any point in the stem. So,
all right, you have 2 pictures on the next one, Terry. This comes to us from Lincoln. She said this weed started maybe last year. She had 1 or 2. Now she has many. She cuts off what she's calling the yellow seed heads when she sees them, and the leaves actually fold up, but they still stay flat, so they don't like completely fold into nothing.
So its common name is sicklepod, and that's because of the way the seeds look, but it's also cassia, sorry. And it's an annual here, subtropical down to like South America. It's just going to be an annual here. It can germinate from the seeds. So if you don't like it, just make sure that you're taking those seeds off so it's not going to germinate in the seed area, or in the landscape area where you don't want it, but it doesn't have a very high germination rate either. So about 25 to 30% is all in undisturbed areas. So if you like it, just enjoy it.
All right. One picture on the next one. This comes to us from Lincoln, and they discovered this all along the edges of sidewalk. They live across from a park, and it's short. It looks like it's been mowed, but they suspect this is not turf grass.
No, this is not turf grass, and if you would walk up the sidewalk next to my house, you would find it all over in the LPS landscape. This is ragweed. This is what it will do if you continue keep mowing it off. You should start seeing those terminal buds at the end. They're going to start turning into the inflorescence, so it's going to try to flower. But you can dig them up. They're going to be pretty hard to dig, so go get that soil knife I'm always talking about, and you're probably going to have to dig them out. But it's ragweed, so one of those common allergy-prone weeds that we have here in the fall.
All right, Terry, thanks. You have one picture, Amy, on your first one. This comes to us from Arlington. This viewer had an autumn blaze maple. The wound was pruned off in 2019, and now this is the damage that this person is seeing in the interior. They were told to seal this wound for this damage.
So the recommendation is we never want to seal a wound. If you seal a wound, that's when we're going to get the rots and spots able to grow, and they're very nice and happy because you created a wet, warm environment. So leave it alone. The tree is healing itself. I know it's been a while, but the tree is doing its job. So just let it be and give it time.
All right, and it is an autumn blaze maple, so its time might be limited.
It might be coming to the end.
All right. Two pictures, Amy, on the next one. This comes to us from Axtell. The top, the very tip, I think we can see this in the picture of this particular spruce. The crown is beginning to fail a little, and then he's seeing some branches die as well a little further down in the spruce. Is this something that belongs in your bailiwick?
It falls underneath the rots and spots. So we actually have two things going on. If we go back to the first picture where we see that top of that crown dying, this is most likely cytospora canker, which is a fungal infection that infects through the trunk and it plugs up that vascular system. So we see the top part of the tree die first because it's the last place that's going to get food and water. The second picture is showing dieback on the branches. It's a little hard to tell. We might be dealing with a little bit of Serococcus shoot blight that we will see. The needles will turn a purple color. Once again, that's a fungal infection, and we can spray for that, but at this point in time, I wouldn't recommend that because cytospora canker is going to continue to move down the tree, and how long the tree will survive, I can't make that prediction. My crystal ball doesn't tell me exactly, but long term, it's not a good prognosis for the tree, and you will need to replace it in the near future.
Well, and if you see those dead needles, people ask us this question as a follow-up a lot, that are within the canopy.
Within the canopy.
Will they re-needle?
So anything that dies within that canopy is done for. And as you can see, that was a very full spruce, and that's exactly what we want. Those needles on the inside are going to die and fall off because they're not getting sunlight. And needles don't last forever. They have a certain lifespan. And so we'll see that interior of that tree turn brown and lose its needles, and that is perfectly fine and normal. Where we get concerned is when we start seeing the needles dying at the end of the tips, and those are the diseases that we typically want to try to treat.
All right, thanks, Amy. You have two pictures on the next one. This comes to us from Lincoln. They have prairie gold aspens. These were NRD trees, about 3 years old. They're seeing these, they're calling it crisping browning leaves on that. They have some other trees that are planted next to the prairie golds that are not doing this.
So I blew up the picture. It looks really close. To me, this looks 100% environmental because we got that hot weather. Maybe the trees aren't getting enough water moisture with them. With them being in our NRD trees, yes, they were really small. They're growing very quickly. But if you're not providing supplemental water, we were cool and then we got hot, kind of like we are at the state fair today, right? Well, nothing likes that really well. And so during those hot periods, if we can provide a little bit of supplemental water to those trees, it would definitely help them out. At this point in time, there isn't anything we can do. Make sure we water them if we go into a dry fall to get them through the winter months so they will green up nice and pretty next spring.
Excellent. All right. You're up, Elizabeth. You have 2 pictures on this first one. This comes to us from Donovan. This is a Norway maple variety. Got hit with Liberty spray drift from a soybean field, and they're wondering, is there any hope for this tree? It's done this. So, is there any hope for this tree?
So the hard part when it comes to herbicide drift is it depends. It depends on the product. It depends on the amount of drift that's there. Now, Liberty is different than some of our other herbicides. It's not a growth regulator. We don't see the cupping, curling, distortion, all of those kinds of ones that we would expect with like 2,4-D or dicamba or some of those other ones. So, I mean, Amy's more well-versed with Liberty than I am. I don't have high hopes.
I don't have a huge high hope on it. But I want to be optimistic. Give it until next spring, see if it's going to green up. If it doesn't green up, time to replace.
And if it does survive, it does have a 3 central leader there. So you're going to want to kind of narrow that down. But you want to wait till next year, see how it leaves out, and then go from there. But you will eventually need to take and subordinate some of those central leaders down.
All right, thanks. Elizabeth, you have 3 pictures for the next one. This one comes to us north of Ogallala near Lake McConaughey. Autumn Brilliant serviceberry struggling. And next to them, choke cherries are doing quite well. They did do water plus a 24/4 fertilizer. Autumn Brilliance is still not doing very well. Do we have a tree suggestion for them?
So the Nebraska Forest Service, Nebraska Statewide Arboretum has a really great list of trees for western Nebraska. I like that list because it narrows it down on size. So what we're going to be looking for is we're going to be looking for some of those elm cultivars. We're going to be looking at honey locust. I know it can be a weed in some parts of the state, but these trees are going to be tough as nails. Unfortunately, on some of those open environments, those maples are not going to be the best choice. So I mean, that trees for western Nebraska is going to be the one to look at and then kind of narrow down based on, the site selection and things along those lines.
And serviceberry wants a little shade, and there
Just a
wasn't
tad.
any. And there wasn't any. All right, 2 more pictures, Elizabeth, for you. This comes to us from Fordyce. She thinks this is a sand cherry, and we've confirmed that. What can we tell people about sand cherry?
So sand cherries are a really great native plant. The fruits are edible. They're similar to like a choke cherry. They're going to have a tart, astringent kind of flavor to it. You add enough sugar to anything and you can turn it into jams and jellies. But it is a very nice multiple seasons of interest kind of plant, and they're very hardy, and they do well in those locations of the state that have those sandier, drier environments.
All right, thanks very much. We are now going to take a trip out to Tilden, Nebraska, where Brent and Mary Kay Broberg have a unique business, which is actually worm castings. And what we're going to tell you about this is how these worm castings are produced and how they can benefit your landscape.
Worms are vital to soil health. They aid in aerating the soil, helping increase nutrient delivery for plant life. But did you know they can also help improve the soil through their compost? An article on worm farming, given to him by his late mother-in-law, piqued an interest that led to a 10-year journey of building a business.
My family's always raised hogs. Hog buildings don't have a long lifespan, so I was trying to think of something you could use old hog buildings for. We're just a worm castings company, is what we do. Is pretty simple. Worm castings are basically worm manure. And a worm is really an amazing creature. The castings have the microbes in them, the good bugs. Plants give off sugar, the microbes sugar, and it's a good relationship. They feed off each other.
The tiny creatures used for the castings are African night crawlers.
We feed them a combination of black peat moss, and then we have a grain-based diet, all organic, non-GMO. and we'll mix those two together in a dirt mixer, run it through a pulverizer, get it mixed up nice and soft and fluffy, easy for the worms to eat. And those worms will go into a big box, and there's approximately 6,600 worms in every box.
The moisture content and the temperature is very critical for keeping worms alive. And so if the peat is too dry, they will die. We do have to adapt that moisture level depending on the season, because it definitely gets drier in the winter since we have to run heaters to keep the building warm for them.
After 2 weeks of feeding and mating, the worms are moved to a tip table.
The castings, the worms, the whole 9 yards comes out of that box, and it runs up through a machine called a trommel, which is basically a big cylinder that turns with different size screens on it. And the worms, the worm castings, everything will go through that trommel. It separates everything out. Once we've done that, the worms are separated out. They go back into another box for 2 more weeks.
With the castings complete, the product is shipped around the nation and used in many different capacities.
The nice thing is they're safe. My kids are out there helping us. With all the pesticides, herbicides we have, it's hard on those microbes in the ground. This is replenishing that, getting your soil healthier.
Well, and the beautiful thing about that is good gardeners also do know that we need all of that wonderful stuff in the soil to be able to make all of our plants grow healthy, wonderful. Looks like a really good spot to get your fishing worms as well. All right, so we will go ahead now with pictures again. Jody, we start with you with one. This one comes to us from Bellevue. And she did a search and thought perhaps this was some introduced moth that came into the United States in the 80s.
Yes, this is definitely an introduced species, but it's been around for a long time. This one doesn't really have a common name, so this is probably one of the first times I'll say a scientific name, but it's called Cythrus sinensis, or a flower moth. So that's not very descriptive, but it was introduced from Asia to Europe and the US a long time ago, and its host plant as a caterpillar is lamb's quarters. So as a common weed, it's got a lot to feed on.
All right, so if you are a forager and you like your lamb's quarters, you might want to look for caterpillars of this particular one, or you're going to get some protein in your lamb's quarters.
Yeah.
That too. All right. You have one picture on this one, Jody. This comes to us from Wahoo. She had one of these in the house, and then it was a trail of what she's calling white and brown pellets. She thought they were ants. She set borax traps. That didn't work. What is this?
Okay, so these are ants. They are, I believe they're acrobat ants. I can tell from, there's one worker on there, but the rest are swarmers, and they're males. So male swarmers are only, around in the colony during these mating swarms, so they only will have wings, and they look like little tiny wasps. So at this time, when they're swarming, they're not interested in feeding, they're interested in mating. So any type of baits are not going to trap them. So what you can do if you have a problem with ants trailing during the summer is do the ant bait, but just the swarmers alone, that's vacuuming them up and finding the hole or gap where they're coming in and sealing that up.
All right, thanks, Jody. You have a really cool picture on this one. This one comes to us from Lincoln. She's wondering if this is eggs that she found on one tiny little stem of her elderberry.
Yeah, so these are a type of insect egg. I can't tell you for sure what species they are, but it's type of true bug. So very similar to like an assassin bug or stink bug. They're like barrel shaped, and they have a little top like lid that comes off. It looks like they've already emerged. So best I can think of, if it's a bug that feeds on plants, then it's one of those types of bugs. And if otherwise it's a predatory bug that feeds on a bug that feeds on elderberry.
All right, excellent. All right, Terry, you're up. You have a couple of pictures coming up. I'm sorry, Jody, you have one more. Sorry on this one. So this is two pictures, a black butterfly with long tails and orange markings around the cilantro. Laid an egg, she saw many others. There was a dark circle in them after a few days. Then a frilly object scurried away. So what is that?
So these are the eggs of black swallowtail butterflies. They're probably hatching out to be caterpillars, but the other host plants are parsley, dill, and fennel. So the little squirrely thing that got away, I'm not really sure what that was.
It was something.
Something.
All right, excellent. So Terry, you have, I think, one picture on your first one, if I'm not mistaken. No, two, sorry. This is a dead buffalograss question, and this particular viewer wants to know exactly why we think this buffalograss bit the dust.
Well, unfortunately, I'm not going to tell you exactly. I'm going to give you lots of possibilities. So we did have a very dry, warm winter. It could have been that. It could have also been our very wet spring and our cool spring. It could have also been there's chinch bugs that get into it that make it look like that. So it could have been several different things. The one thing that I'm going to tell you, though, is that you're going to want to probably reseed if you want to take it back into buffalograss, and now is not the time to do that. You'll have two options to do that. You can do that like October to December and do a dormant seeding, or you can wait till like next June, July and put it down then. So since it's a warm season, everything kind of gets pushed back, unlike our cool season grasses.
All right. Yeah, that's a tricky one
Yeah.
at this point. All right, I think you have one picture for the next one, or two maybe, to be able to see it better, but at least one. And what in the world is this terrible viney thing that is taking over the entire landscape?
So we're seeing this a lot. This is burr cucumber. So it is an annual here. They said that they're pulling it down, which is probably the best thing that they can do. Try to follow it back down within their landscape and pull it off as much as you can, because I've actually seen it on a tree in Lincoln that they just kept leaving it every year, and now that tree is dead. I drive by it every day to work, so does Kim.
Mm-hmm.
But we've seen it actually kill, a very big tree. So you need to get it down as soon as you possibly can.
All right, excellent. And you have one more question, one more picture. And this one, I think, is these people bought some sod. They bought it like this a couple weeks ago to patch their lawn. They're wondering what to do to get this sod to survive.
Unfortunately, you should have just taken this sod straight back to wherever you purchased it. It doesn't look like it's in very good condition to start with. It looks like it's already started drying out, and once those roots start drying out, it's very hard to get them rehydrated in the state that they're in. You might go back and talk to whomever you got it from. Maybe they can give you some replacements. But you can go ahead and put down grass seed now if you wanted to start from seed and start it that way.
All right, excellent. Okay, Amy, you have two pictures on this first one. This comes to us from Papillion. They're battling spots in their bluegrass. They treated with an insecticide, and a couple of weeks later with a fungicide, twice, 2 weeks apart. Nothing was working. So what do we think here?
So what we have going on here is brown patch. If you see the first picture, when you're looking at the blades, you got that tan to almost white lesion with a really dark border on it. Very classic brown patch situations. We find it in very lush lawns. And so typically what we're going to do is we can treat with a fungicide. You're going to need a foliar, because if I remember right, the person used a granular fungicide. You're going to need to use a spray liquid formulation. There's several different fungicides available on the market. Beyond that, culturally, things that we can look at is when are you putting your nitrogen down, making sure we're putting the appropriate amount of nitrogen down in the fall versus the spring, since we're going to see it in a very lush lawn. Sometimes those lawns are being over-fertilized. So managing that fertilizer, and then Terry's already mentioned about reseeding, and seeding is, we're getting to that time. A lot of the new cultivars of bluegrass are resistant to brown patch. So those areas that I'm having problems in, I would really recommend that we overseed with a resistant variety. Make sure you're buying good quality seed with the proper label, and look at those varieties and look for ones that are highly resistant to brown patch.
Excellent. Thanks, Amy. You have one picture on the next one. This comes to us from Rural Dwight. She received this, it's a double file viburnum. And it was planted in full sun in clay soil in May, and it's got these beautiful measles spots, and they are getting worse. She's wondering, will this survive?
It's going to survive. So the measles spots that you're seeing there is actually bacterial leaf spot, very common to see in viburnum, especially this year when we've had some wet and high humidities, which is very favorable for it. I don't recommend any type of treatment for it. Proper sanitation this fall is going to help after it drops its leaves, but it will green up just fine next year, and you're still going to have a beautiful viburnum.
Excellent. All right, one shroom ID picture on this one. This is Grand Island. Saw this shroom, wants to know what it is. They did not want to pick it, and certainly did not want to eat it.
It's a beautiful yellow mushroom. I believe, I couldn't ID it completely. There are so many different yellow mushrooms, it is so hard to identify. So this is one that's probably a saprophytic. It's doing a good job. It's breaking down that dead organic matter. But one big reminder I will have for any of the mushrooms that you guys find in your home lawns or gardens, we do not recommend eating those. There's several mushrooms that we have in Nebraska that are poisonous, and there have been some issues. If you're looking at doing edible mushrooms, make sure you are getting those identified by the Mycology Society or with an experienced forager who has been foraging for mushrooms and know those identifications really, really well. Please do not be trusting Facebook, Instagram, any of the social medias, or even some of the web pages on mushroom identification, because last thing you want is a really upset tummy and not feeling good for several days because you ate the wrong thing.
Excellent. Thanks, Amy. You have one more picture. This comes to us from Colorado for a New Jersey viewer. And she said it's been very damp this year in New Jersey. She wonders what this is, and is it harmful to pets and dogs?
It isn't harmful. This one's actually kind of cool. This is one of those slime molds that we have, kind of like the dog vomit. There's several different types of slime molds. They're breaking down that dead organic matter. They're very short-lived. If you don't like them, hit them with a high spray of water. They'll wash away. They don't like free water. And they'll disappear. They only stick around for a day or two, and they dry up really fast.
Excellent. Thanks. All right, Amy, 2 pictures on the first one. This is a maple that was planted 3 years ago. This is in Lincoln. It has a split at the bottom of the trunk, and this particular viewer is wondering what to do about this.
So first and foremost, what we need to do is we need to find the root flare. Anytime our trees look like a post in the ground, it's usually an indication that we either have a planting depth issue or possibly we have a stem girdling root. So my guess is we probably don't have a nice flare because it's probably planted too deep, and the crack is just a secondary thing that we're seeing as a result of the planting depth issue. Now, the thing to keep in mind is trees are not always going to die when they're planted. They're going to try to limp along as long as possible and try to survive. So I dig around, find that flare, see how far below grade that is, and if it's much more than a couple inches, you might consider replacement. Because let's be honest, you're not going to dig it back up and raise it 2 inches.
All right. You have 3 pictures on the next one, Elizabeth. This one is a tulip tree, 3 years old, now 20 feet tall. The leaves have cupped this year. Some have spots, some are turning color. It was cared for properly. He's wondering, is it drift and what to do?
So when we take a look at the leaves are kind of curling under. And when we're taking a look at herbicide drift, especially those growth regulator herbicides, what we're going to notice is that epinasty of it curling upward. And so curling under doesn't necessarily mean that we have herbicide injury. Now, we don't know exactly where at in the state where this viewer was from, and that would be helpful to be able to narrow that down just a little more. In the center part of the state, I have seen tar spot, but it's like big, noticeable spots. So, your best bet is to water, watch, and wait. The 3 W's, make sure it gets an inch of supplemental moisture a week, watch it, kind of see what happens.
All right, and you have one more picture, Elizabeth. This comes to us from Victoria Springs Rec area. They want to know what the shrub is.
Yes, so that is a cranberry bush viburnum. Now, the cranberry bush viburnum we do have some native ones that are out there, but we also have the dwarf ones. And the dwarf ones, when we say dwarf, it means they're smaller than the standard ones. They're still going to be very tall, but this is a very hardy shrub, has some good landscape value, has some good wildlife value to it, really tough as nail one. It's fun to look at, but this says that cranberry bush viburnum.
Excellent. Thanks.
And it's all
Elizabeth.
around the state fairgrounds.
Yes, it is. Excellent. Thanks. Well, we have to take a short break, but stay with us. There's a lot more Backyard Farmer coming up right after this. Coming to you from the Nebraska State Fair. Right after, shortly later on in the show, we're going to see some emerging cicadas, which will really be fun. Remember, we can't take your calls tonight because this is a taped show, but you can still send us those pictures and questions for a future show. And right now, it is time for the lightning round, or plants of the week, not lightning. We're kind of off our game since we've been doing the show a little differently this year. So Elizabeth, what do we have for lightning or plants of the week?
I'm going to do plants of the week right now. So for the plants of the week, we've got some really nice looking plants that we borrowed from the Raising Nebraska Outdoors. For starters, we have this orange one, which is the butterfly milkweed. This is one that, like our common milkweed, does attract a wide range of pollinators. It attracts the butterflies. It's a little different in the way that it's got an orange flower on it instead of a pink flower, but it still has these lovely seed pods that are on it. And when they are ripe, they will just burst open and those little fluffs of seeds will go everywhere. So it is a really nice one. It doesn't bloom as tall as like some of the other common milkweeds. So the other one that we have that just looks like a bunch of pods, because it is, what it is wild senna. And what that is early in the spring, it has these really cool yellow flowers on it. And then as the flowers mature, it gets into these long bean pods. It's really cool because it's also a pollinator plant. It attracts a wide range of pollinators. It's going to be a little bit taller. It could be that 4 to 6 foot in range, but it is one that has a very unique and interesting form on it once we have those seed pods on there. And give it enough time, they'll start to turn brown and they won't look nearly as pretty. But it's one that does attract a lot of pollinators with both of these, and they are really easy to grow across the state.
Excellent. Thank you, Elizabeth. Well, you know, throughout the season, we stress the importance of taking notes and figuring out what is going on in your landscape or your garden. So for the Garden Minute, that is exactly what Terry James is going to tell you in our Backyard Farmer Garden.
This week in the Backyard Farmer Garden, we are taking inventory. We're checking out what worked, what didn't. Remember, I'm always telling you, keep that journal, keep notes, mark down when your rain comes and all that kind of stuff so we can keep track of what our season looks like. We've had a really good season here in Lincoln and we're really happy with what the garden looks like. We are starting to actually put some of those cool season crops in. Have to wait a little bit yet for some of those lettuces because they do like the soils a little bit cooler. But we have put a second set of green beans in and kind of crossing the fingers to hope that we get a good pick out of them before the season turns cold. The garden looks great, and just because we're in Grand Island this week doesn't mean you can't get to Lincoln and check it out. So stop by the Backyard Farmer Garden and see how great it looks.
So taking notes every single season, what works and what doesn't, is going to make you a happier gardener for starters, because you're not going to try what doesn't work next year. All right, let's go to questions next. You've got 2 on the first one, Jody. She found this beautiful insect on Rattlesnake Master here in Lincoln. What is this?
This is a 2-spotted scoliid wasp. The adults of wasp nectar, and they feed their larvae protein. And it's actually the grubs of that green June beetle.
Really? So it turns into a beautiful thing, and that's a beautiful plant?
That is the beautiful thing.
There it is. That's the beautiful thing.
That's the beautiful thing.
All right. You have one picture on the next one, Jody. This comes to us from Elkhorn and Douglas County, kind of both. You have two people that sent this in. One has a pine infested with bagworms, too big to handpick, and the cocoons are wriggling. The other has a spruce, and both of them, and you can see one bag, I think, or two hanging on this spruce in the picture. Both of these viewers want to know what they can do now because either the trees are too big to handpick or they just don't want to pick them.
Okay, if they cannot do anything now and they don't want to hand pick, then they have to wait until next June, and then they can use a product called BT to combat and kill the tiny caterpillars that will emerge. You just want to wait till they've all emerged and stop ballooning so that when you treat the tree, that they can eat that and then die.
Die. All right. So you have one picture on the next one. This is a Lincoln viewer. And you can kind of see in there what he's concerned about, including the holes in the flower. But these are dahlias. He wants to know who the dahlia eater is.
Yeah, there's a bunch of beetles on there. Those are the northern corn rootworm beetles. And there's also a spotted cucumber beetle on there. It's the same family and genus. When they're out of the crop and the adults really like to go to any kind of flowers, and there's not really anything you can do because that's where our bees and pollinators go as well. So just, shaking them out and maybe putting them in soapy water, but it's very hard to catch these.
All right. One picture on the next one. This comes to us from west central Iowa. This is an aster foliage eater, and you can see that lovely creature on the leaves there.
Yeah, there's two.
I know, there are two. There's one hiding down below.
Yeah, these are yellow-striped armyworms, also generalist feeders, and they can be found on a lot of different flowers in the garden. Just hand pick them off when they're that big.
All right, excellent. And one more for you. It's kind of insect central tonight. This is a Ceresco viewer, found this worm in leaf litter. She's concerned that this is the invasive Asian jumping worm.
This is a jumping worm, and I can tell because of the dark color, but that clitellum, or that reproductive organ there, is very cloudy. It's very flush with the body and goes all the way around. There wasn't any comment on its behavior, though.
No.
But if she did get to poke around, it would jump out of the soil. So you want to just remove that from the garden. There's nothing labeled to kill the earthworms right now, and products that are available as fertilizers. We're not really sure the long-term effects if it is implied into the environment.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much. Terry, you have two pictures on the first one. This comes to us from a Columbus viewer. She wonders, what is this pretty grass? She just wants to know what it is.
So this is a pennisetum, and it's most likely this that I have. It's made it trip from Lincoln, so it looks kind of sad. But probably frosted explosion. So those of you who know me know that I plant lots of grasses in the backyard farmer garden, and this is one of the ones that I like. And it is a great one. It's an annual, and it'll look fantastic, and it goes well into fall, and it will look great in your flower arrangements too.
All right, excellent. You have one picture on the next one. This is a Carroll, Nebraska viewer. She wonders what the tallest grass in this picture is. What is it and how to get rid of it?
So this isn't a grass. This is actually yellow nutsedge. A couple things that you can do. Really, I'm going to tell you just to go ahead and keep pulling it. Some people say not to, but if you just continually pull it, it's going to take all of its energy away. It's going to be something that you're going to have to do on a more frequent basis than just spraying it, but it's going to be much easier for the environment if you just do that. Especially now, you have to treat it earlier in the season if you're going to spray it.
And we had all three of those pictures come up, which was all the same plant,
Yep.
which is perfect because we are seeing a lot of questions about nutsedge
Yep.
right now.
And sometimes it's the yellow in the turf too. So sometimes it's not necessarily the iron that's tied up, it's yellow nutsedge.
And how would people tell by the blade itself?
You have to go down and kind of take your finger and go around the stem. If the stem is a triangle, then it's yellow nutsedge. If it's circular, then it's a grass of some type.
All right, excellent. You have one picture on the next one. This one, Terry, comes to us from Lincoln. She loves this grass. She wonders, what is it? And if she plants it, will it seed into the lawn and the landscape?
So this is Job's tears. So this is an annual here. It's subtropical, like zones 10, 9, 10. So It may seed itself about, but it's probably going to be something that's really nice, and I would just probably let it be and be pretty.
All right, excellent. Amy, you have 2 pictures on the first one. This is a Lincoln viewer. He has, oh, I'm sorry, we've got you. Sorry, Terry, I missed one more for you. This is in a raised bed, and then it's not in a raised bed. So what's this and what happened here?
So this is angel's trumpet. So sometimes people confuse this. It's a datura with Jimson weed. So what you can do is if it doesn't have any hairs, it's Jimson weed, and if it's got hairs, then it's the angel trumpet. So angels have hair, so that's how you can remember it. It's one that it's going to have tons of seeds. If you don't want it to go on all over, then you need to take those big bulbs and get rid of them and make sure that they don't break open in your landscape.
All right, now 2 for you, Amy.
Okay.
This is a Lincoln viewer, container-grown impatiens and begonias. They're collapsing. They did the same thing last year. He said it's shady. He says it's not too wet. He does not rotate the soil in these containers. He's tried a fungicide, an insecticide, and slug bait.
Okay. So looking at this, there's probably one of 2 or both things going on. So impatiens get a foliar disease called downy mildew, which is very prevalent, especially with the weather patterns we've had, and it will really make those impatiens melt down. And so when we look for downy mildew, you're going to see yellow spots on the leaves, but when you flip it over, it's nice and fuzzy on the underside is an explanation for downy mildew. The other thing I'm really concerned about is you had this problem last year. There's a lot of fungal diseases of the roots and the crowns that go after begonias and impatiens. And because you reuse that soil, that means that inoculum was already present. They are favored by wetter conditions, but depending on how the drainage is for these above beds, whether it's draining well enough, especially when we have had some storms go through the Lincoln metro area earlier, that maybe caused it to get too wet. And so when we see an issue where we've had a root or crown rot issue, we want to pull that soil out and bring new soil in because there really isn't any good products that we can use. There are some drench fungicides, but they don't always work the best. I would recommend replacing that soil and starting fresh next year.
Excellent. All right, you have 1 picture on the next one. This is a Carney viewer. She wonders whether her zinnias have aster yellows.
This does have aster yellows. It looks a little funky, and I think it looks pretty cool. But yes, it is aster yellows in your zinnias, and it's an annual. You can let it go, but if you're concerned, I would just remove it.
All right, 2 picks on the next one. This comes to us from Gretna. 6-year-old mums, chrysanthemums, and this is the first year for this coloration that we're seeing.
This one is really a stumper. Typically, we don't see mums do this type of coloration. The concerns are aster yellows can go into mums. And so the only way to know for sure is I would send a sample into Kyle so he can actually look and test for aster yellows and wait and see what the plant does long term to see if it's aster yellows or an environmental issue. This one was a stumper.
All right, this one won't be. You have 1 picture on this. This one comes to us from a farm between Minden and Avoca. Her 92-year-old grandma found this puffball.
This is a puffball. It is a ginormous puffball. Super duper duper cool. This is an edible mushroom, I will say puffballs are. And if you're interested and you go to Michigan, they actually have puffball festivals in Michigan, and you can have a puffball steak.
Oh, brother.
You eat them before they get black and icky on the inside.
How bad. Okay. Elizabeth, 3 pictures for you on this one. This comes to us from Kearney. She cuts these spireas back to 12 inches every year. Last year, 1 began to die. She found ants, dug down, found nothing. Another started. These are 40 years old.
So with some of our spireas, we have to take a look at the growing environment. These guys are surrounded by rock and they have concrete. And so we could be looking at what we like to call environmental. We could be having snow load, we could be having salt, it could be ending up all right there. The things in the middle look the hardest hit, And I can't guarantee they're going to fill back out, because if you've been cutting them back every year and they're still not filling back out, in order for you to have the spireas that you want, you might need to replace them. That being said, they are 40-year-old spireas.
Right.
So the probability of you finding the exact same cultivar that's going to look exactly the same as the other ones on either side is fairly minimal. So, be prepared to change it up a little and maybe try a different cultivar.
Excellent. All right, you have one picture on this one, Elizabeth. This comes to us from Omaha. He wants a suggestion for an understory tree or a little dwarf evergreen to plant kind of over there to the open space under that big maple.
I will just say good luck. Reason for that, has a shallow root system. Evergreens are not going to do really well in that location, so your best bet's probably going to do some shade-loving perennials is going to give you the best bet that you're looking for.
All right. You have two pictures on this one. This is a Bradshaw viewer. Has heirloom brandywines, cracking, splitting. He grows them every year. They've never done this before.
It's an influx of rain right as they're starting to get ripe, so these are ones we want to pick when they first start to blush. The cracking on top, again, deals with the cultivar or the heirloom that we have. So environmental across the board, still technically edible.
All right, and two pictures on your last question in this round. These come to us from Friend. She got this hydrangea in May. It was pink and green, and now it's just green, and she wonders how she can get the color back in the flowers this year.
You're not going to. They go from pink to green to brown. So this is an age thing. Just embrace it. If you don't like it, go ahead and prune them off.
All right, excellent. Well, earlier in the season, Jody encouraged us not to kill those cicadas. So we get to see them emerging, and that's what our next segment is going to be. We get to hear that wonderful sound. So let's see what Jody has to see, say, and hear about those cicadas.
I hope you've been outside and hearing and seeing the cicadas, or at least the evidence that they're leaving behind. The annual cicadas are also called dog day cicadas because they come out during the hottest times of the summer, which is right now. So you may be seeing a lot of the different exoskeleton, which are the shed skins of the cicadas. They are crawling out of the ground in their last nymphal stage. They're gonna find a tree or a building or something to hang on to, and then they'll go through their final molt. And then they'll turn into adults. When they emerge, it's really cool, and you may be able to see them if you go out at nighttime these days with a headlamp and look for them. You may see them starting to emerge, but they need to hang upside down and vertical so that they can inflate their wings and let them dry so they can fly away. And if you are able to let that happen, you will be able to see them in the trees, flying around, and you'll also be able to hear them. They are one of the loudest things out there. They can be louder than a lawnmower. So get outside and listen to those sounds of summer.
You know, I know a lot of people don't like that sound and they think they're creepy, but I think it's just great. I just love to listen to them. All right, we have one announcement, and that is, of course, we are still doing our Grow-A-Row, which is our produce donation in the Backyard Farmer Garden. Tuesdays, 4:30 to 7, we, of course, donate that produce, so we really appreciate your bringing it to us. We have still a lot of questions to go through, and we can do this. So, your first one, Jody Plattsmouth. This insect was found in her rock garden. She just wonders what this beautiful beastie is.
This is a great black wasp.
Wow.
That's really what it's called.
That's deep.
Okay, you have such wonderful common names for insects. They're so simple. So your second one comes to us from Omaha, and this is a moth ID.
Actually, this is a skipper, which is more butterfly than moth, but this one is the fiery skipper.
Because it looks like fire?
Kind of, but skippers are, they're very erratic flyers, and there's a lot of them out right now. They're kind of medium-sized. They're very cute. go enjoy them.
All right. Then we have one picture from Fremont. And these are orange bugs on zucchinis. And we've had these, I think, several times this year.
Yeah, this is the first year I've ever seen a lot of ladybug or lady beetle pupae on Backyard Farmer being submitted. And I think it's because we've had so many aphids this year, which is the prey. They're the predator, so they've been out there.
All right, and you have one more. This comes to us from Lincoln. Took this picture of a mosquito, and they're wondering, is this a really bad one? There are swarms of them.
So this one is Aedes albopictus, which is the Asian tiger mosquito. However, I just want to let people know that there is like surveillance, and there's not the pathogens that are spread normally by these, so not to be alarmed. But we do have populations of this mosquito in Lincoln and Omaha.
All right. Terry, you have one picture on this one. It comes to us from Overton. She wants to know what this weed is. It just sort of came from nowhere.
I think this is either fennel or dill. I think it looks like it's kind of in a shaded area, so that's probably why it's falling over. Just kind of take your hand and touch it. If it smells like pickles, then it's dill. If it smells like black licorice, then it's fennel.
All right. You have one picture coming to us from Eustace. Found this coming up in the pasture, and they saw some huge 4-footers in Lincoln. What's this one?
So this is snow on the mountain. So this is in the euphorbia family. It will have like that white milky sap. So if you pull it and you have like a latex allergy, I would probably make sure that you wear gloves and stuff if you're going to take this out. It can make some animals sick. So if it's in your pasture, you may want to get rid of it.
All right. 3 picks on the next one. This is a Lincoln viewer. He thought this was a shrub or a tree. What is it?
This is pokeweed. So we see this a lot, and you're going to see it like huge this time of year. Lauren eats it, but you have to boil it like 20 times before you can eat it. I would tell you not to eat it because it really is, most of the plant is poisonous. A bird most likely brought this.
All right. Amy, you have one picture for you on the first one. Mm-hmm. So they've had shrooms for 2 years before, and now they have them again, and he's wondering how to coexist with them.
Just enjoy them. I mean, most likely you have a tree root that it's breaking down and it's sporulating. If you don't like it, cut it off and go on your merry little way.
All right. And also from Omaha, you have one picture on this next one. What is this? This one edible?
I'm going to tell you no, just to be on the safe side. This one's really pretty, though. Look at that deep red color. You don't get that red coloring anyplace else. Enjoy it. It's most likely a Boltus type fungi. Just enjoy it.
All right, one pick on the next one. This is also Omaha. So a nannyberry viburnum has these leaf spots. Is this something to worry about?
Well, at this time of year, I wouldn't be too worried about it. Omaha, you guys have been hit with storms, and you are humid. It's powdery mildew. Perfect weather conditions for powdery mildew right now.
All right. Speaking of which, you have one picture from Gretna. Is it time to cut the peonies down because they look like this?
It is time to cut the peonies down. All that wonderful powdery mildew is just going to town. Cut them down, dispose of it. You're going to have powdery mildew again next year. If you can try to increase airflow in there, you will help eliminate some of that powdery mildew.
All right. Elizabeth, 3 pictures. This is a Lincoln viewer, a 50-year-old Scotch pine. The twin died over just a couple weeks, a few years ago. It's close to the house. Should that one go to the mulch pile?
Eventually, yes. Scotch pine is really susceptible to pine wilt. If the twin went down, more than likely the other one's also going to get it at some point in time. It's already starting up in the upper canopy with some of that dead one, so be on the lookout for that. But yes, it is one that I would consider removing as soon as we start to see those symptoms.
Well, and that one has kind of an odd, funny...
And they were merging, and they were not merging.
We had some issues with Scotch pine. All right, this one is really strange. 2 pictures. It's a banana. Yeah, it was us. Yeah, we're not. Well, we are strange. It's a banana. It has a hard, crunchy interior. And he did save some for us if you want to taste it.
No,
yeah.
The technical term for this is black center syndrome.
Sounds official.
So, black center syndrome, what happens is the banana was in transport, it wasn't treated properly, it was kind of beat up, it got dropped, something along those lines. It created an internal bruise that we can't see until you go to eat the banana. So, black center syndrome.
Another reason not to ever eat bananas. You have 2 pictures of arborvitae leaning from Omaha. We have about 20 seconds.
You're probably going to want to remove. Look at the degree of lean. If the degree of lean changes and gets more severe, at some point in time, it's going to start to topple over. They're getting big enough that snow load and wind and all that's probably going to affect it. So, I would take a look at possible removal at some point in time.
Well, and especially since probably the weight is really going to keep them going like this, and they probably don't have much of a root mass to begin with. So.
Not especially on that side with the house. So
Exactly.
eventually it's gonna go.